Hi, this is Grandma, and I am reading The Iron Ring. We were certainly left with a cliffhanger at the end of chapter 25. Um, we don't know what happened to Tamar. An iron mace was the last thing he remembered. We also kind of wonder what's happened to Miri and Rajaswami and Adikavi and Hashkat, all of them, because the battle is not going well. Chapter 26, The Burning Ground. It was all very puzzling. He was in a tent, but he had the dim recollection of leaving the camp in flames. Also, he was lying on his back and could not move. The war drums were still beating in frenzy. It took him a little while to grasp that the pounding was inside his head. Everything was swimming. Splinters of memory floated by. When bit by bit they finally came together, he gave a terrible cry. Then his stomach began churning violently. People seemed to be talking among themselves, making comments about this. "Stand him up," somebody said. His legs buckled a little when he was hauled upright. He discovered why he could not move his arms. They were tied behind him. A circle of officers watched with idle interest. One of them was Nahusha. "It's over, you know." Nahusha had taken off his breastplate and helmet, his sword as well. They lay in a pile nearby. He was wrapped in a handsome white silk robe, the sash loosely tied around his waist. "Do you understand? Over, done with." Tamar said nothing. Nahusha fluttered his fingers. "Flown off, scattered to the wind, gone to lick their wounds, and whatever one does when thrashed. Ah, my unfortunate cousins, I should make some effort to feel sorry for them. One must always pity fools. But set your mind at ease. It's all been taken care of." Nahusha went on smoothly. "The noble Ashwara, by this time, is it true, as I've heard? He vowed to fight no one but me. I regret the lost opportunity. In any case, he's been properly dealt with, as a piece of carrion. Your friends will no doubt turn up when we clear away the bodies." "Oh, the Brahmana, he's quite well. He's in the palace now. Someone found him wandering around the field and kindly took him in. I commend that. It would be immoral to harm a Brahmana. Forgive me, I almost forgot the most delicious news of all. My beautiful Gopi, charming, delightful little thing, and so energetic. Have no fear, she's safe and comfortable. Lodging in the women's quarters for the moment until I can make other arrangements, so to speak. I think in the long run, she'll do nicely." Tamar spat in his face. Nahusha started. His cheeks went dead white. He sucked in a long breath and snapped his fingers. A servant quickly brought a handkerchief. Nahusha wiped his lips. "That was discourteous of you," he said. "You really should not have done that. You've spoiled things for yourself." Nahusha looked with distaste at the cloth and threw it away. As an afterthought, he drove a fist into Tamar's face. Tamar felt something crack. Blood began pouring out of his nose. He would have lunged at Nahusha, but the men on either side of him held him fast. He kicked and bucked, trying to wrestle free. Nahusha calmly observed his efforts. "Oh, little king," he said, "I warned you to keep out of my way." "Fight me," Tamar shouted, raging. "Fight, Nahusha. I challenge you in front of your officers. They hear me. Accept you must. Dare refuse? Let them see you shamed." "What challenge?" Nahusha said. "How can there be a challenge from a dead man?" "As you are, for all practical purposes. It's merely a question of technical detail. You understand that, surely." Only now, what to do with you? Nahusha frowned thoughtfully. You've made me change my plans. I intended killing you, of course. That goes without saying. But you see, you behaved so badly. You were crude and insulting, conduct befitting even your own rustic dignity. In view of that, have you the arrogance or stupidity to expect an honorable death? There are limits even to my indulgence. Nahusha stepped away, called his officers around him. Tamar caught nothing of their conversation, only murmurs back and forth. Someone gave a sour laugh, then with barely a glance at him, Nahusha strode from the tent, his kshatriyas following. Tamar stood waiting. In a little while, when no one came back, he sat down. His shirt was damp and sticky. The two guards, bored, shifted from one foot to the other. They finally sat down too. Tamar's head throbbed. His face had swollen, his eyes puffed. All in all, he did not feel very well. When he asked the guards how long he would be kept there, they shrugged. Eventually, 2 foot soldiers came into the tent. He was almost glad to see them. They got him up, took him outside. The bright sun hurt his eyes. It was hot, probably only afternoon, but the morning seemed long ago in some different world. Nahusha's warriors were striking the last of the tents, loading gear, trundling carts through open gates. A chariot and driver waited. When Tamar was unable to climb aboard, the soldiers hoisted him onto the platform and clambered in beside him. The charioteer set off at an easy pace, heading from the encampment and skirting the western walls of the city. Tamar saw a wide river sparkling in the sun. He assumed it was Rana. He wondered, with only passing objective interest, where they were taking him. He did not wish to speculate much on the meaning of Nahusha's parting words. Whatever Nahusha had in mind for him, past a certain point, it would not matter. Okay, now remember, Nahusha's parting words were he would not get an honorable death. For a kshatriya, an honorable death would be fighting and dying in battle. So, it's not going to be a fight. It's not going to be a battle. So we'll have to see where they're going to be taking him. Closer to the Rana, with the city some ways behind, he began to notice a rank odor. Faint at first, it soon grows stronger. The chariot halted at the edge of a barren field. Wisps of smoke rose from nondescript heaps here and there. The stench had become intense. It filled his nose and throat. He could taste it. He gagged uncontrollably. He had by now fully understood what it was. He could not hold back a cry of horror. He stumbled to his feet and tried to pitch out of the chariot. It was the paupers' burning ground, the shmashana. They were expecting him. A few more soldiers and a naika, a low-grade officer, stood in front of a ramshackle hut. They looked impatient, uncomfortable, not at all happy to be there. The naika beckoned. Bring him. Get this over with. Tamar had a flash of memory of Rajaswami before Muktara, shuddering at even a passing glance of the shmashana. He turned and twisted, scuffed his feet on the stony ground. They finally had to drag him. The naika had something in his hands. Tamar could not see what it was. It was of no great interest. His immediate concern was to get away from this place. He counted his life lost. Worst, his caste was threatened. That's his station in life. He's a kshatriya and a king. Whatever else he was, a kshatriya. Let them kill him on the road, the riverbank, anywhere. but this polluted ground. He had been terrified during the night attack. That already had been shame enough, but now he was on the brink of panic. He tried to run. They kicked his legs. He stumbled to his knees. The Neka stepped behind him, took him by the hair, and pulled his head back. He assumed the man was going to cut his throat. Instead, something like a thick leather dog collar was quickly set around his neck. He heard the snap of a lock. The Neka attached the collar to a heavy length of chain, paid it out, and bolted the end into an iron ring set on a wooden stake. The Neka hastily moved away. Tamar lunged to the full length of the chain. The force of his efforts jerked him back. He fell down. So he has been chained like an animal. The Neka paid no further attention. He was talking with his men. "Where's he gone?" asked the soldiers. "Curse him, he was here just before the chariot came." "Who knows?" one of the soldiers said. "Doing whatever he does, he'll be back." "Damned if I wait for him. He's been told. He understands." The soldiers, relieved to be on their way, trotted toward the road. A figure had come, shambling from somewhere behind the hut. Without breaking stride, the Neka hurriedly called over his shoulder, "That's him. Get on with your business." Tamar could barely keep from screaming. He had never seen one before. But he had been well-bred, carefully and thoroughly instructed. He knew instantly what the creature was, and the mere sight was an offense to his eyes. The lowest of the low, as Rajaswami told him, even too low to have any caste at all, a chandala. Now, in English, we call them the untouchables because they are the people that have no caste, no bearing. They are really not considered human. They're called untouchables because to touch them is a horrible thing in Indian culture. Tamar flung himself as far as the chain allowed. The chandala stood looking at him. He was short and stocky, bandy-legged with long, muscular arms, naked, except for the dirty rags roped around his waist. His dark skin was further blackened by streaks and smudges. The tangled, greasy hair fell below his shoulders. The chandala studied him a few moments and then said, "So you're here. Did they tell you why?" Tamar did not answer. He was choking on his bile. The chandala was actually approaching him. Tamar heaved at the stake, trying to uproot it. Failing, he scuttled crab-like out of reach. The chain limited his distance. The man moved quickly upon him. Tamar glimpsed the knife in his hand. The chandala, with remarkable strength, easily threw him face down, set a foot on the small of his back. He bent and gripped Tamar's arms. The man had a ferocious stench about him. "Lie still or I'll cut you." Tamar realized the chandala was slicing through the ropes tying his hands. As soon as he felt the bonds part, he began clawing at the dog collar. "Leave off," the man ordered. "A waste of time. It's a good strong lock. I know. I have the key." Tamar stopped short. "Set me loose. They've gone. Who'll know? What difference can it make to someone like you?" "A big difference. You're going to kill me. Have done with it." The chandala laughed. It was a wheezing, rattling sound. "Do you take me for a fool?" "What then?" The chandala squatted down beside Tamar, who shrank back as the man thrust his face closer. "You don't know?" He peered at Tamar with bloodshot eyes. "They didn't tell you?" Tamar shook his head. "Why, you've been given to me. Here you are. Here you stay. You're mine. My property." The man gave a broken tooth grin. "See the joke?" A chandala owning a slave. Tamar saw the joke. It was too horrible not to be seen. The ground lurched under him. he finally realized what Nahusha intended. He had to be reasonable or go mad. No, 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 this can't be. I'm a Kshatriya, king of Sundari. You're in my kingdom now, the Chandala said. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, Tamar pressed on. I'm supposed to be killed. Please, I ask you, I beg you. Tamar could not believe his own words. A Kshatriya was begging a Chandala? For the sake of mercy. I'll keep you alive. That's all the mercy I can afford. You'll work for me. Once you're settled in and see how things go, you will have plenty to do. It's always busy, days after a battle. Why is it so busy days after a battle? Because that's where they take the bodies, and that's why it smells so badly. They burn the bodies after a battle, and the Chandala does that. The Chandala stood up. The sun was beginning to set. Wisps of smoke from the burning ground merged with the gathering dusk. The chain's long enough. You can sleep inside the doorway. When Tamar said nothing, the man shrugged. Well, suit yourself, he said, turning toward the hut. Oh, watch out for the pie dogs. They come scavenging around this time. They don't much care if their pickings are alive or dead. Change your mind? The door's open. He disappeared inside. Tamar sat, face in his hands. He had been touched by a Chandala, cast broken. Himself, now a Chandala. This was not acceptable. Therefore, the immediate thing was to convince himself the Chandala had not really touched him. Given this urgent task, he set about rearranging his memory. He had not even been near the Chandala. It had worked out in some way. His caste was unbroken. That was a lie, he knew it. Even so, he had to bury the fact. If he could not erase it, somewhere deep inside his head and let it shrivel there, forgotten. He did not succeed. The Chandala came out of the hut. He set an earthen bowl in front of Tamar, who stared at the broken pits of food as if they were scorpions. The man waited a moment or two. Seeing Tamar had no intention of eating, he shrugged, went back inside, leaving the bowl on the ground. The moon was up, stars clotted around it. Tamar sat motionless, telling himself over and over that he was not a Chandala. From the tail of his eye, he glimpsed vague shapes like smears of ashes, darting furtively. A pie dog, scenting the food, slunk up, tail between its legs. He was more of a skeleton of a dog, ribs jutting from sunken flanks, fur spiky with bald spots and open sores. It crept forward, belly scraping the ground. The pie dog stopped in front of Tamar. Its hackles went up. The creature bared its teeth, half snarling, half whimpering. Tamar still did not move. The pie dog inched ahead, then halted again. When at last it understood there would be no quarrel over the food, it stuck its muzzle in the bowl and gulped down the contents, then drifted off like a puff of smoke. From across the burning ground, they began to howl. First one pie dog, then another, until the whole pack was in full cry, baying, and wailing. Tamar clamped his hand to his ears. When the pie dogs finally stopped, he still heard the howling. That's the end of chapter 26, and we're stopping here. The next chapter is called the Chandala, so we're going to maybe find out more about what being a Chandala is or who the Chandala is. But it seems to me Tamar's got himself in quite a mess. We don't have too much more of the book to go, so hopefully he gets rescued and he can continue on his journey. Anyway, that's all for now. Bye-bye.